didn't get me, but I'm definitely gonna get you. Oh my, I missed.
The 80s gave us action heroes who killed hundreds without breaking a sweat. But some films went too far, even for that decade's loose standards. Countries banned them, censors cut them to ribbons, and moral guardians called them dangerous. These are 10 brutal 80s action films that got banned worldwide. Number 10, The Exterminator. James Glickenhaus directed this 1980 Vigilante film, and it immediately got caught in censorship battles across multiple countries. Robert Ginty plays John Eastland, a Vietnam vet whose best friend gets paralyzed by a gang. When the police do nothing, Eastland becomes a one-man execution squad, hunting down criminals and killing them in increasingly brutal ways. The film was banned outright in the UK as a video nasty and faced heavy censorship in Germany, Australia, and several other countries. What got The Exterminator banned wasn't just the violence, but how Glickenhaus filmed it. This wasn't stylized action movie carnage. It was gritty, ugly, and shot to look as real as possible. The opening Vietnam sequence shows actual documentary footage mixed with stage scenes, immediately establishing that this film wasn't playing by normal action movie rules. When Eastland tortures a gangster by hanging him over a meat grinder and then turns it on, the scene doesn't cut away. You see the aftermath in graphic detail. The film's politics were also problematic. Eastland isn't conflicted about his vigilantism. He's absolutely convinced the justice system has failed and citizens need to take law enforcement into their own hands. The film presents this viewpoint sympathetically, showing police as incompetent or corrupt, and the legal system as protecting criminals. That message alarmed authorities who worried the film would inspire copycat vigilantes. The UK banned it under the Video Recordings Act as one of the notorious video nasties. The film remained banned for years, until a heavily cut version was finally allowed release in the 90s. Over 5 minutes of violence were removed, neutering many of the film's most brutal sequences. Germany similarly banned it, and the uncut version remains prohibited there. Australia banned it initially, then allowed a censored version, then re-banned it after public outcry. What makes The Exterminator effective beyond its shock value is Robert Ginty's performance. He plays Eastland without the usual action hero charisma. This is just a traumatized veteran with combat skills, using them to kill people he's decided deserve death. There's no pleasure in it for him, just grim determination. That realistic portrayal made the violence feel more disturbing, because it wasn't entertainment for the character, it was just work. The film spawned a sequel and influenced countless revenge thrillers, but the original remains the most notorious. Its commercial success, despite the controversy, proved there was an audience for extreme vigilante violence, which encouraged other filmmakers to push boundaries further. The Exterminator opened the door for the brutal action films that followed, establishing that audiences would accept protagonists who were barely distinguishable from the criminals they fought. That moral ambiguity combined with graphic violence is what made censors determined to keep it out of theaters and video stores worldwide. Number 9, Class of 1984. Mark Lester directed this high school action thriller about a music teacher battling a gang of psychopathic students, and it faced bans and heavy censorship for showing teenage violence in graphic detail. Perry King plays Andrew Norris, a teacher at a violent urban school where gangs control the hallways and teachers are powerless. When he tries to fight back against student gang leader Peter Stegman, played by Timothy Van Patten, the situation escalates to rape, torture, and eventually a violent showdown in the school's halls. What got Class of 1984 banned in multiple countries was its depiction of teenagers committing extreme violence. The gang members rape the teacher's wife, murder other students, and terrorize the school with complete impunity. The film shows this violence explicitly, and censors worried it glorified teenage criminality. Several countries banned it outright, arguing it could inspire school violence. This was nearly 40 years before Columbine, but authorities already feared films depicting armed students as dangerous propaganda. The rape sequence is where the film crosses lines that made it genuinely controversial. Stegman's gang breaks into Norris's home while he's at school and assault his wife. The scene is prolonged and brutal, shot to maximize the victim's suffering. Lester claimed he wanted to show the real consequences of gang violence, but critics argued he was exploiting sexual assault for shock value. Multiple countries cut this sequence entirely or banned the film because of it. The film's violence against teenagers also troubled censors. When Norris finally fights back, he kills students in graphic ways. One gets hanged, another stabbed, a third burned alive. The film presents these deaths as justified revenge, which authorities found morally reprehensible. Showing an adult authority figure murdering teenagers, even criminal ones, violated taboos about protecting youth that most countries held sacred. The UK initially refused certification, effectively banning theatrical release. When it eventually got released, significant cuts were required. The rape scene was trimmed heavily. Several death sequences were shortened. The film's message about failed authority and justified vigilantism was considered too dangerous for British audiences still dealing with urban violence and youth crime. Michael J. Fox appears in a small role as a student, one of his first film appearances. Roddy McDowall plays a biology teacher who's been broken by the school's violence, keeping a gun in his desk and living in constant fear. McDowall's performance shows what Norris will become if he accepts the school's lawlessness, and that character added depth to what could have been simple exploitation. The film found its audience through home video despite censorship battles. The controversy actually helped it commercially, with horror and action fans seeking out uncut versions. Class of 1984's influence is visible in every subsequent film about school violence, from The Substitute to Dangerous Minds, though none matched its nihilistic brutality. The film's prediction that schools would become war zones felt like hysteria in 1982, but became tragically relevant as school violence increased in subsequent decades. Number 8. Vigilante William Lustig.
There are some 40-odd homicides a day on our streets. There are over 2 million.
Directed this 1983 revenge thriller that makes Death Wish look restrained, and it was immediately banned in multiple countries for its graphic violence and pro-vigilante message. Robert Forster plays Eddie Marino, a factory worker whose wife is murdered and son maimed by a gang. When the justice system gives the criminals light sentences, Eddie joins a vigilante group led by his co-worker Nick, played by Fred Williamson. What follows is systematic murder of criminals presented as heroic community service. What made Vigilante more controversial than similar films was its explicit advocacy for organized vigilantism. This wasn't one man seeking personal revenge. It was a coordinated group of citizens hunting down criminals with the implicit support of their community. The film presents this as necessary and morally justified, showing police as ineffective and courts as corrupt. That message was dangerous enough that several countries banned it rather than risk inspiring copycat vigilante groups. The violence is relentless and graphic. Lustig shoots the attacks with documentary-style realism. No dramatic music or stylized choreography. When the vigilantes hunt down criminals, the killings are brutal and efficient. A drug dealer gets burned alive in his car. A mugger is beaten to death with baseball bats. The gang leader who killed Eddie's wife is tortured at length before being killed. Censors in multiple countries demanded cuts, but Lustig's film lost its impact without the graphic violence, so several territories just banned it entirely. The film's depiction of the justice system as completely broken was also problematic. The judge who gives light sentences to Eddie's family's attackers is shown as corrupt and caring more about criminal rights than justice. The prosecutor is weak and ineffective. The police detective, played by Joe Spinell, sympathizes with the vigilantes even though he's supposed to stop them. That systematic indictment of institutions alarmed authorities who worried the film would undermine public faith in law enforcement. Robert Forster's performance grounds the film in reality. He plays Eddie as an ordinary man pushed past his breaking point, not as an action hero. His transformation from peaceful worker to killer is gradual and believable. That realism made the violence more disturbing, because it suggested anyone could become a vigilante, given sufficient provocation and opportunity. Fred Williamson as Nick represents the film's true ideology. He's been running this vigilante operation for years, and he's completely comfortable with executing criminals. Williamson plays him as charismatic and principled, making vigilantism seem like a viable alternative to failed legal systems. That portrayal, combined with the film showing the vigilantes as successful and facing no real consequences, made authorities in multiple countries decide the film was too dangerous for public consumption. The UK banned Vigilante as a video nasty, and it remained unavailable there for years. Germany banned it. Australia banned it. The film's reputation as forbidden fruit actually helped it commercially in countries where it was available. Like many banned films, Vigilante became more influential through its notoriety than it would have been through normal distribution. Number 7. Death Wish. C. 3. Michael Winner's 1985 sequel went so far over the top that multiple countries banned or heavily censored it for glamorizing extreme violence. Charles Bronson returns as Paul Kersey, now actively seeking out crime-ridden neighborhoods to clean up. He arrives in a New York neighborhood controlled by a vicious gang and proceeds to kill dozens of criminals using increasingly ridiculous weapons. The film is essentially a feature-length massacre presented as entertainment. What separated Death Wish 3 from its predecessors was the complete abandonment of any pretense of realism or moral complexity. The first Death Wish had some ambiguity about vigilantism. This one presents mass murder as problem-solving. Kersey doesn't just defend himself. He sets traps, uses military weapons, and kills gang members by the dozen. The body count is so high and the violence so cartoonish that several countries banned it for trivializing murder. The film's politics are openly fascist. The neighborhood residents cheer Kersey as he exterminates the gang. The police give him unofficial permission to operate. There's no suggestion that poverty, lack of opportunity, or systemic racism contributed to the gang's formation. They're just evil, and killing them all is presented as the only solution. That simplistic good versus evil narrative combined with graphic violence made authorities uncomfortable. The violence itself is where Winner completely lost control. Kersey uses a rocket launcher in residential streets. He sets up a machine gun in his apartment and mows down gang members. One criminal gets killed by a booby-trapped car that explodes. Another falls on spikes. The film turns urban crime into a video game where the goal is maximum kills. And that gamification of violence alarmed censors worldwide. Charles Bronson plays Kersey with zero emotion or humanity remaining. He's become a killing machine who shows up in crime-ridden areas like an avenging angel of death. There's no character development or internal conflict. He just kills people, and the film presents this as heroic. That complete absence of moral questioning made the film feel like propaganda for vigilante violence. The gang members are portrayed so one-dimensionally evil that they barely register as human. They attack old people, destroy property, and kill for sport. The gang leader, played by Gavin O'Herlihy, is a mohawked psychopath who grins while committing atrocities. This dehumanization of criminals made their mass execution easier to accept, which is exactly what troubled authorities. The UK gave Death Wish 3 an 18 certificate, but only after significant cuts. Germany banned it initially, then allowed a heavily censored version. The film's commercial success, despite controversy, proved audiences loved seeing Bronson kill dozens of people per film, which encouraged even more extreme action films. Winner's complete abandonment of restraint pushed action cinema toward the nihilistic excess that would dominate the late 80s, where body counts and explosive spectacle mattered more than plot or character. Number 6. Savage Streets.
Get the hell back to class! Who the fuck is this asshole?
Danny Steinman directed this 1984 sexual assault revenge film starring Linda Blair, and it faced bans across multiple countries for its graphic sexual violence and brutal revenge sequences. Blair plays Brenda, a high school student whose deaf-mute sister gets gang-raped by a group of thugs after Brenda humiliates their leader. When the sister ends up in a coma and another friend is murdered, Brenda arms herself and hunts down the gang one by one. What got Savage Streets banned wasn't just the violence, but how Steinman filmed the sexual assault. The rape sequence is prolonged and explicit, showing the sister's terror and helplessness in graphic detail. The film lingers on her suffering, and censors across multiple countries argued this crossed the line into exploitation. The fact that the victim is deaf and mute, making her more vulnerable, added an extra layer of cruelty that made the scene even more disturbing. The revenge sequences are where the film becomes genuinely brutal. Brenda doesn't just kill the rapists, she tortures them. One gets strangled slowly with a bear trap. Another is set on fire. The gang leader gets crossbow bolts shot into him before being finished off. Blair plays these scenes without the usual action hero, quips, or satisfaction. She's just methodically destroying the men who hurt her sister. And that grim determination made the violence feel more vicious than typical exploitation fare. The film's treatment of women was also controversial. Before the rape, there's significant nudity and sexualization of the female characters, particularly in locker room scenes that serve no narrative purpose beyond exploitation. Critics argued the film wanted to have it both ways, objectifying women and then using violence against them as the engine for revenge fantasy. That hypocrisy made feminist groups and censors unite in opposing the film. Linda Blair's participation added controversy because she was still known for The Exorcist. Seeing the former child star in an exploitation rape revenge film felt transgressive, and that casting drew more attention from censors than the film would have received otherwise. Blair claimed she wanted to show that victims could fight back, but the film's exploitation elements undermined any empowerment message. The UK banned Savage Streets as a video, nasty. The rape scene alone would have gotten it censored, but combined with the torture revenge killings, authorities decided it had no redeeming value. Germany banned it. Australia banned it. The film developed a cult following precisely because of its banned status, with collectors seeking out bootleg copies. The supporting cast includes John Vernon as a principal and Robert Dreyer as the gang leader. Dreyer plays him as irredeemably evil, leering and violent without any humanity. That one-dimensional portrayal makes his eventual torture easier to accept, which is manipulative filmmaking designed to let audiences enjoy extreme violence guilt-free. Savage Streets exists in the weird space between women's revenge fantasy and male exploitation film. It wants to be empowering by showing a woman violently avenging sexual assault, but it also exploits that assault for shock value and includes gratuitous nudity throughout. That contradiction made it controversial with both conservatives who objected to the violence and progressives who objected to the exploitation. The film satisfied nobody except exploitation's fans who just wanted extreme content regardless of politics or morality. Number 5. Pieces. Juan Piquer. Simon directed this 1982 Spanish slasher that markets itself as action, but is really just a chainsaw massacre disguised with a Boston campus setting. The film follows a killer, stalking and dismembering young women with a chainsaw, collecting body parts to assemble a human jigsaw puzzle. Christopher George plays a detective investigating the murders while the body count rises. Multiple countries banned it outright, with censors calling it one of the most misogynistic films ever made. What got Pieces banned across Europe wasn't complicated. The film shows graphic chainsaw murders of women in extended sequences that feel designed purely for shock value. A woman gets sawed in half in a bathroom. Another gets her head cut off. The killer uses the chainsaw on limbs and torsos, while the camera lingers on every cut. There's no artistic merit or social commentary, just women being mutilated for 90 minutes, while a thin murder mystery provides minimal plot justification. The film's marketing didn't help. The tagline was, "It's exactly what you think it is," practically admitting the film had no ambitions beyond showing women getting killed. Another poster promised, "You don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre." That gleeful embrace of exploitation made censors even more determined to ban it. The film wasn't pretending to be anything other than misogynistic violence, and that honesty somehow made it worse. The UK banned Pieces as a video nasty, one of the most notorious on the list. The British Board of Film Classification refused to even consider it for certification. Germany banned it completely. Australia banned it. Spain, where it was made, heavily censored it for domestic release. The film became legendary among gore fans precisely because it was forbidden, with bootleg VHS copies trading hands for ridiculous prices. What makes Pieces fascinating beyond its infamy is how incompetent it is. The dubbing is atrocious. The acting is terrible. The plot makes no sense, with red herrings that go nowhere and a killer reveal that contradicts established facts. There's a completely random kung fu attack in the middle that has nothing to do with anything. The film is trash, but it's entertaining trash if you can stomach the graphic violence against women. Christopher George and his wife Linda Day. George star as the detective and undercover officer investigating the murders. Both were television stars slumming in exploitation, and their presence gives the film slightly more credibility than it deserves. They play everything completely straight, despite the ridiculous script, which creates this weird tonal disconnect between their professional performances and the amateur carnage around them. The killer's motivation, revealed in a prologue, is that he murdered his mother as a child for punishing him over a new jigsaw puzzle. 40 years later, he's recreating that puzzle using real body parts. This makes no psychological sense, but Simone isn't interested in realism. The film exists to show creative murders, and the plot is just framework to connect them. Pieces remain banned in multiple countries for decades. The UK finally allowed a heavily cut version in the 2000s, but the uncut film is still prohibited. The film's legacy is as one of the most extreme slashers of the early 80s, proof that the video, Nasty Panic, had legitimate targets mixed in with the innocent films that got caught up in censorship hysteria. Number 4. Combat Shock.
Dad, it's me.
Buddy Giovinazzo's 1984 nightmare about a Vietnam veteran's descent into hell was banned in multiple countries for its graphic violence and unrelenting bleakness. The film follows Frankie Dunlin, a traumatized vet living in a Staten Island slum with his wife and deformed baby. Over 24 hours, his life completely collapses. He can't find work, owes money to loan sharks, and spirals into violence that ends with him murdering his family and committing suicide. It's barely an action film, more like a horror movie about poverty and PTSD. What got Combat Shock banned wasn't traditional action violence. It was the film's graphic depiction of urban decay, drug abuse, and the murder of a baby. Giovinazzo shot it guerrilla style in real Staten Island slums, and the authenticity makes it almost unbearable. This isn't Hollywood poverty. It's documentary-level deprivation, showing how America abandoned its veterans. The baby, deformed supposedly from Agent Orange exposure, cries constantly throughout the film. When Frankie finally snaps and kills it, several countries banned the film immediately. The violence is ugly and amateurish, which makes it more disturbing. Frankie kills a pimp by stabbing him repeatedly while the camera just watches. He shoots loan sharks in their office in a sequence that feels genuinely dangerous because the filmmaking is so raw. The final murder-suicide is shot in one long take without any cinematic distance. You're just watching a man methodically destroy his family. And it's horrifying, specifically because it's not stylized. The UK refused certification, effectively banning it. Germany banned it for extreme violence and the baby killing. Australia banned it. The film's nihilism was too much for censors who could accept violence in the fantasy contexts, but not in realistic portrayals of veteran homelessness and despair. Combat Shock argued that America created monsters by sending men to Vietnam and then abandoning them. And that message was too uncomfortable combined with the graphic content. Rick Giovinazzo, the director's brother, plays Frankie with this hollow-eyed thousand-yard stare throughout. He's already dead inside from the beginning, just going through motions until he finally acts on his suicidal ideation. The performance has no technique or craft. It's just raw desperation, which works perfectly for the material. The film's budget was reportedly $60,000, and every penny is on screen in the worst way. The production values are nearly non-existent, sound is muddy, lighting is minimal, but that cheapness reinforces the film's themes about poverty and neglect. A slick production would have undermined the point. Combat Shock found a cult audience through bootleg distribution, with fans appreciating its unflinching look at veteran PTSD and urban poverty. But it remains banned in several countries, considered too extreme and too hopeless for public consumption. The film offers no redemption or hope, just documentation of one man's complete breakdown. And that honesty is what makes it both important and unwatchable. Number 3. Tenement. Roberta Findlay directed this 1985 urban action horror about tenants fighting back against a gang that takes over their building, and it was immediately banned in multiple countries for sustained brutal violence. The film shows a Bronx tenement where residents testify against a gang leader, sending him to prison. His gang retaliates by invading the building and systematically torturing and murdering residents. The surviving tenants eventually fight back in an extended violent climax. Its death wish confined to a single building, and it's relentless. What got Tenement banned was how Finlay filmed the gang's rampage. This isn't quick action movie violence. It's prolonged torture scenes showing rape, mutilation, and murder in graphic detail. A pregnant woman gets kicked to death. An elderly man is beaten with his own cane. A young woman is sexually assaulted with a bottle. Finlay doesn't cut away or imply violence. She shows it explicitly, and censors across multiple countries decided the film had no purpose beyond depicting human suffering. The film's politics are openly fascist. The police are completely absent. The legal system is shown as impotent, with the gang leader released almost immediately. The only solution is for tenants to become as violent as the gang, murdering them without mercy. That message about justified extreme violence combined with the graphic content made authorities very uncomfortable. Several countries banned it rather than risk inspiring vigilante violence. The cast is mostly unknowns, which adds to the film's documentary feel. These look like real tenement residents, not actors playing poor people. When they're being tortured, the fear feels genuine. When they fight back, the violence is clumsy and desperate rather than choreographed. That realism makes everything more disturbing, because it could actually happen. The rape sequences are where Tenement crosses into territory that made banning inevitable. Finlay shows multiple sexual assaults in graphic detail, always from the victim's perspective to maximize suffering. Critics argued she was exploiting sexual violence for shock value while claiming to condemn it. That hypocrisy is why censors showed no mercy in cutting or banning the film. The revenge climax tries to provide catharsis, with tenants using improvised weapons to kill gang members. One gets thrown off the roof, another is stabbed repeatedly. The gang leader gets beaten to death. But the violence is so extreme and the casualties so high that it doesn't feel like victory. It just feels like everyone lost. The UK banned Tenement, refusing any classification. Germany banned it. Australia banned it. The film's reputation as one of the most violent urban action films of the 80s is entirely justified. Finlay, who'd previously directed pornography and horror, brought that exploitation sensibility to action cinema and created something too brutal for most markets. The film remains difficult to find uncut, with most available versions heavily censored or of poor quality from generation-lost bootleg copies. Number 2, Turkey Shoot.
The re-education and behavior.
Brian Trenchard Smith directed this 1982 Australian dystopian action film about a future where dissidents get hunted for sport, and it faced immediate bans for its graphic violence and fascist imagery. The film is set in a totalitarian future where political prisoners are sent to camps. The worst prisoners get selected for the Turkey Shoot, released into the wilderness and hunted by wealthy elites for entertainment. Steve Railsback and Olivia Hussey play prisoners fighting for survival while being stalked by psychopaths with high-powered weapons. What got Turkey Shoot banned was its combination of graphic violence and political overtones that made multiple governments uncomfortable. The film shows prisoners being tortured with cattle prods, forced into sexual slaveries, and eventually hunted and killed in extended sequences. When prisoners fight back, the violence is equally brutal. One hunter gets his hand chopped off with an axe. Another is killed by his own dogs. The camp commandant, played by Michael Craig, gets blown up by a grenade. The film doesn't just show violence, it revels in it. The political subtext made censors even more determined to ban it. The hunters represent wealthy elites treating poor people as disposable entertainment. The prisoners are political dissidents being punished for opposing the regime. Trenchard Smith was clearly making a statement about class warfare and government oppression, and that message combined with extreme violence alarmed authorities in multiple countries worried about political instability. The UK initially refused to certify Turkey Shoot, though it eventually allowed a heavily cut version after years of appeals. Over 8 minutes of violence were removed, including most of the hunting sequences and the graphic deaths. Germany banned it completely for years before allowing a censored release. The film's original Australian release was uncut, but subsequent home video releases faced censorship even in its home country. What makes Turkey Shoot more than just exploitation is Trenchard Smith's craftsmanship. The action is well staged and exciting. The dystopian future is realized on a tiny budget through clever production design and location shooting. The film works as both political allegory and action entertainment, which is rare for Ozploitation cinema. That quality made it more dangerous to censors than incompetent trash they could easily dismiss. The supporting cast includes Roger Ward as the lead hunter, a sadistic monster who treats the hunt as foreplay. Noel Ferrier plays the camp's head guard with bureaucratic cruelty. Carmen Duncan plays a wealthy woman who participates in the hunt for sexual thrills. All of them are one-dimensional villains, but the actors commit fully to making them as despicable as possible. The film's ending, where the surviving prisoners escape and blow up the camp, provides satisfying action movie catharsis. But it doesn't undo the preceding brutality or suggest the totalitarian system will change. The implication is that camps like this exist throughout the country, and destroying one changes nothing. That bleakness is what made Turkey Shoot more than typical action fare, and what made censors determined to restrict its availability worldwide. Number 1. Cannibal Ferox. Umberto Lenzi's 1981 Italian cannibal film is barely an action movie, but it markets itself as adventure cinema to disguise its extreme content. The film was banned in more countries than any other 80s film, with 31 nations refusing to allow its release. The plot follows anthropology students traveling to the Amazon to disprove the existence of cannibalism, only to encounter a tribe that proves them catastrophically wrong. What follows is 90 minutes of graphic torture, mutilation, and cannibalism, presented as documentary-style reality. What got Cannibal Ferox banned worldwide was everything. The film shows real animal killings, including a turtle being butchered alive, a pig slaughtered on camera, and a monkey killed and eaten. Multiple countries banned it immediately just for the animal cruelty before even considering the human violence. Then there's the graphic torture sequences showing castration, hooks through breasts, a man having the top of his skull removed, and his brain eaten. Lenzi didn't simulate these effects well. He made them look as real and disturbing as possible. The film's attitude toward indigenous people was also deeply problematic. The Amazon tribe is portrayed as savage cannibals who torture and eat people for entertainment. There's no cultural context or anthropological nuance, just racist stereotypes about primitive peoples presented as documentary fact. That combination of graphic violence and racism made the film indefensible to censors who might have allowed extreme content with redeeming social value. The cast includes Giovanni Lombardo Radici as a drug smuggler who abused the tribe, justifying their revenge. John Morgan plays another victim. Lorraine DeSalle plays the anthropology student documenting everything. The performances are adequate, but they're beside the point. People watching Cannibal Ferox aren't interested in acting or plot. They want extreme content the film delivers enthusiastically. Lenzi claimed he made the film to condemn violence and show the barbarism humans are capable of committing. Nobody believed him. The film is clearly exploitation designed to shock audiences with taboo imagery. The fact that it made millions despite worldwide bans proved there was an audience for extreme content regardless of artistic merit or social value. The UK banned Cannibal Ferox as a video nasty, and it remains one of the few films still prohibited in uncut form. Germany banned it, Australia banned it. Even Italy, where it was made, censored it heavily. The United States allowed it limited release, but most theaters refused to show it. The film existed in legal limbo, available only through underground distribution and bootleg copies. What makes Cannibal Ferox the ultimate banned 80s action film is how it represents everything censors feared about unregulated video distribution. This was content that would never have received theatrical release, but home video meant anyone could rent it at corner stores. The moral panic about video nasties was specifically about films like this reaching audiences without oversight, and censors responded with blanket bans that took decades to reconsider. Cannibal Ferox remains the most banned film of the decade, proof that some content was genuinely too extreme for public consumption, even in this anything-goes 80s. So there you have it, 10 80s action films so brutal that countries worldwide decided audiences couldn't be trusted to watch them. Some deserved their bans, others got caught in moral panic, but all of them pushed boundaries so far that censors had no choice but to respond. These films remain controversial decades later, proving some images never stop being dangerous.